The main questions that we're going to be talking about here are, how do I know if my professor is saying what he or she thinks, or whether they mean something else? Or what if my professor really means what he or she is saying, but I'm just interpreting it wrong? And so we're wondering how graduate students can best understand and exceed their advisors' expectations. And so I'm going to ask our faculty, as they introduce themselves further, because we have both a combination of professors and graduate program directors on our panel today, if as they introduce themselves a little bit further, talking about their role in the department, if maybe they might have an example or two of something that they have said to students and students have perhaps interpreted it differently. We'll go ahead and start with Dr. Miller right here on my right.
Okay, so my name is Steve Miller. I've been at UMBC for 12 years. I've been a member of my department's graduate committee for every year that I've been. I would say that I'm not sure that I have specific examples of cases where I know that I was misinterpreted. I'm assuming that I probably have been misinterpreted by my students at some point. I know that I'm not perfect at all in this area, but I guess the best advice that I would give is to make sure that your lines of communication are as strong as they can be with your faculty advisor or with a professor who's teaching the class that you're taking with that professor. I think oftentimes students think of faculty as being so much above them, or they deserve so much respect that that you cannot engage them with problems that you may have with the way that they teach or the way that they run their research group. And I can't speak for all faculty, and that's one problem I think with questions like this, that it suggests that we all act the same way, we all think the same way, we're all different, just as you guys are all different. But one thing that I can say is that it works best to find out what works best in terms of communicating with your mentor or with your professor. And don't be afraid to question their policies or to try to get more information from them about why they're doing things the way that they're doing them. So I guess the most important advice I would say is to try to establish a relationship that's not one that you're down here and your mentor is up here. I think of my students as being colleagues, because students are the lifeblood of my lab. Without students, I can't do any research. I have very little time to go into the lab and do research on my own. So probably we depend upon you a lot more than you think we do, and you should make a strong effort to engage us as more along the lines of equals instead of as being underneath your advisor or your professor.
Okay. I think I'm going to get back.
And this is perhaps part of it's a case by case. Steve, I prefer Steve. Steve, I ask my graduate students to call me Steve, and then this is just borrowing on Dr. Miller's remarks. We actually do have some faculty in our department who prefer that you still address them as doctor. And they will let you know at what point you can start calling them by their name. But many faculty will give you that invitation. And that's an invitation. And please, so I mean, call me Steve. They'll sometimes give you that information in an email. Thinking about one of the thousands of times I've probably said something that has been misinterpreted, a lot of it might have to do with style. I think of what we do as a lot of fun. We get to learn, and we get to be paid to learn, and I like to have fun with things, and so I don't articulate stuff as chores so much as, and this is a good example, and I know I'm guilty of it, and I actually have to clarify myself. When I'm talking to my students, and we've got our committee set up, and they have a draft, which I'll talk about in a moment, of their proposal, I'll say, run it past the rest of the committee as well. Make sure you run it past them. The reason I say this, my training is actually not so much in kind of substantive psychology as it is in statistics. So I find that the other committee members are stronger in some areas, for example, in social psychology. When I say run it past, I mean take it very seriously, and don't just do something where you give it to them, but really question these things, meet with the faculty to make sure that what they've got down there is sound. And so it's perhaps a stylistic thing where I am I don't want to say undermining, I'm underestimating the amount of effort I think a student might need to express, but it's still a fun thing to do. The draft thing, I wholeheartedly agree. And the rationale when we say we want to see a draft, we all, and you probably better than I, can correct your documents for stylistic errors, for grammatical errors, for typos, one of the real big ones for numerological errors, numbers. Check those the same time you're checking your letters. You can do that. We all can do it just as well. So why then are you giving it to me? You're giving it to me from my particular insight that you can't get from your roommate or your classmates or someone else. And I often joke when thinking about drafts, find someone who respects you but is remarkably meticulous, to the point of anal is a good word that you might describe that person. So they mark every single little thing in your draft. You don't have to agree with them, but you want everything found. And I also agree, clarification is good. You know, I mean, if they ask you to do something and you're not sure, then you say.
Apparently the new program, it's the Masters of Professional Studies for Cybersecurity, and so we're a new program, and I teach cybersecurity law, so I'm a lawyer in this program teaching it. As a lawyer, I'm sorry, I've never said anything that's not clear. So this is a foreign question to me. But in chance, if your professor says something that you might think is unclear, being in the cybersecurity program, I think now you guys are all very lucky. All you need is to ask Siri on your new iPhone, and she will interpret it for you for exactly what that means. So with everything that's coming out, you guys should be all set to go forward. With that said, see, I'm teaching a law class to a bunch of technical folks. And so what I try to do is to get them thinking like lawyers for a short period of time. So I do have to be very clear with what I'm doing. I've also gone through our continuing education. I'm from the Army, and we have a Army law school that we keep going through. And ironically enough, as joking as it might be, when those professors are telling you something that we expect to see in the exam, they literally will stamp their foot on the ground, and it's kind of a running joke. But part of that is, see, I'm doing the same thing. You're busy, and for my small class, I want to make sure you're taking away the information that I'm giving you. Now, that's great for me, and that works wonders. But I'm sure you probably take a lot of classes in which you've got to take notes from a lecturer, you have a textbook to read, you know, handouts to look at, plus your own research to do. So you have to take 4 different things and bring them all together and figure out how you're going to present that information for be it either a paper or for an exam from that aspect. As you've heard up here, I always sit there and start out with the, hey, I apologize for being the dull tool in the shed, but can you go over that again? Because I tell you, if you got that question, as we've always heard, 3 other people in the class had the same question on that. So if you don't sync clarity, that's a hit on you. I mean, and by the way, and it's aspect, well, God, it's easy for you to say that. No, I'm saying that as a student, too. I'm paying money, and I'm getting this, then I want to get the best education I can, so go ahead and seek clarity from it, be it right there in class, or finding a time when the professor's available to go up and say, hey, I have a couple questions, this one would be a good time to clarify that. So that's your aspect of it, to seek the clarification from it. The draft aspect on life, I'm telling you right now, I review drafts still. Everything has to get run through the lawyer for where I work. And I see things where I read it, and the sentence is half a page, and there's no less than 10 to 12 ands in the sentence. And so if you think that writing a good draft and getting it to somebody is just here, it's for the rest of your life. And you will get so much credit if you can write well in your drafts. It'll put you way above your peers. So think of that when you're turning something over to somebody. Are you, being what we say with a typical lawyer, the conclusion is where we just stop thinking, and I'm just passing to somebody else to say, okay, here, you improve it now, or are you actually putting that product forward that you've improved it? So on the drafts, that's the best I can go with on that.
Okay.
The idea is that all of us have our various degrees up here on the panel. We've all worked very hard, and we know what it takes, I hope, to get a degree and to do original research and to publish papers and to communicate our ideas to other people. We don't need to do that again. I don't need another PhD. The fun that I have, and Steve was saying this, is the fun that we have is working with you guys and helping you achieve those same things. So when I suggest or talk to my students or ask them to do something, it's not necessarily for me. It's because I think it will help them get from where they are right now, either past the roadblock or to the next step, or just get closer to their degree. And I find myself using the phrase, "you might want to," a lot. I tell you, you might want to look at this paper. You might want to go to the library and look up the papers by Pitts, or you might want to go up to the library and see what Miller published last year. I think there was a paper. And I say that because I don't want to, and I guess what I really mean is, you should pretty much do this thing for your own good. But I don't want to be the kind of advisor that's telling you, the student, what to do. I don't want to say, you need to do A, B, and C, and I need to see a report by the end of the week. Otherwise, you're no good as a student to me. I really want the students to understand that you're working toward your degree, not my degree, and I want you to make the decisions, right? And I'm going to help you, but you ultimately have to be responsible for making the decisions, reading the papers, doing all the work. So it's kind of my way of giving you the advice I think is important and essential, but not forcing you or telling you that you have to do that. Because the whole idea is that we're here to help you guys. That's the whole ball game. And goes back to what's been said before, but it bears repeating. If you don't know, then